Hello, welcome to Shad Life and Happy New Year. It is 2023. I am going to talk about my predictions for 2023 and then also talk a little bit about what my plans are for my channel. I don't think things are going to change a whole lot, but I do have some ideas that I'm going to talk about. And again, I will put a timeline in the description so you can just click to the segments you want to watch. Cool. Let's get to my predictions. So, all signs are pointing towards a recession coming. And with the pandemic and everything, it kind of all makes sense that this is happening. Also, during the pandemic, the bicycle industry had a huge spike, a big boom, and it was kind of opposite of what they thought initially. So it was kind of like they panicked going into pandemic and then realized, oh, all these people are buying bikes and stuff because it was like the thing you could do. And then they got this big spike and they weren't quite prepared for the spike. And then so they had to do all this catch up. But then we had supply chain issues. And then all of a sudden that reversed and the demand dropped and the supply chain, all that stuff they ordered came quickly. So now they have an oversupply of stuff. And that is a big problem. And it was kind of predicted that was going to happen. So it just will depend on which companies kind of were smart enough to realize it was going to happen and plan for it. And then there's going to be companies that are just going to have overstock of stuff. So expect there to be some really good deals in 2023. I think that there'll be some good closeout deals and things like that to get rid of stuff. I've already kind of started to see it happen and so on and so forth. So that is definitely my prediction for 2023. If you're interested in buying a bike, just kind of wait a little bit, and I bet you'll see some really good deals out there because companies will be closing stuff out to get rid of the oversupply that they have, because they need to have more money in their pockets, so they can buy more things, and having that money in inventory isn't good for them. So we'll see that happen, almost guaranteed. Kind of along the lines of this recession coming on, I feel like our options are going to get trimmed down quite a bit. One of the ones I'm a little worried about, and I've already kind of seen that start to happen, because companies, they're all about money. They want to, make things easier to manufacture and more slimmed down. And to do that, they have to allow less options, and one of those is 27.5 wheel size. And I already see this kind of trend. I noticed it in suspension forks. It's really hard to find a 27.5 specific suspension fork. Yes, you can have a 29er fork and put a 27.5 wheel in it, so on and so forth, but because of that, I just feel like the bike industry really seems to keep pushing 29ers, and I hope 27.5 doesn't go away, because I rode a 29er for a while there. That was the Ibis Ripmo AF, and the wheels just felt too big for me. I'm only 5'7". I like the bike to have a lot more, maneuverability, toss it around some, and 27.5 wheels provide that. And so I hope they don't go away from 27.5, but I kind of see that happening. Also, other options are like so many increments in a model line. I think that'll get reduced. Things like that. There'll just be fewer options. I feel like there's kind of too many anyway, and it's too complicated, especially for somebody getting into the sport. Like, too many types of mountain bikes in the category. I mean, you've got your XC bikes. Now we have downcountry that's been more recently added, which is just an XC bike with a little more suspension. But how is a downcountry and a trail bike any different? But I feel like trail bikes are really getting aggressive and more like what an enduro bike used to be, and then enduro bikes are even more closer to like a free ride bike, but they're still like all these categories. You got cross country, you got down country, you've got trail bike, you've got enduro, then you have free ride or park bike, if you want to call it that, and then you have a downhill bike, right? Like, just so many categories, and I feel like they should start blending them, but hopefully that starts to happen. And the down country category makes no sense to me. It's like, I don't know, just evolve cross country bikes to be a certain way. Hardtails are definitely still around, and those are pretty cool. I love the hardtail category. They're definitely a lot more affordable. You can get higher end components for a lot less money with a hardtail. And I don't think a full suspension bike is always necessary for a large majority of mountain biking. So I'm not quite sure why full suspension is like seems to be a thing people think they have to have. I think most people should just ride hardtails. You get develop your skills better and things like that. So hopefully the hardtail trend continues, because that's a really good category for people, especially when it comes to affordability. And continuing on with the recession that we're going into, bike brands are cutting their marketing budgets big time. And Specialized recently announced that they're discontinuing their ambassador program. That's really unfortunate, because those programs are what grow the sport. So I found it kind of interesting. Oh, I need coffee. It is morning. I found it interesting that that's where they decided to cut, because it's like, well, if you want to make money, you got to grow the user base that's going to buy bikes and so on and so forth. But Specialized, I've never been a huge fan of that brand. It's just never been, I've always thought of them as the big corporate bike company that makes big corporate style decisions. And so hopefully those people can find work elsewhere. Maybe they'll come together, create their own media ambassador thing, and do something on YouTube. I don't know, but hopefully they figure out an avenue, because that's kind of unfortunate, because a lot of those people, that was their living. But I see more of that coming, more marketing budget cuts, and the people that are going to get affected by that are YouTubers. Probably a lot of YouTubers will lose a lot of the support they get from brands, and people out there that are pushing the sport and things like that. But the reality is there's a lot of us out there that do this because we're passionate about it, and that would be me. Like, I don't make money on my YouTube. I mean, I make a tiny bit, but I mean, this isn't what I make for a living. I have another job I do, and I do this because I have a passion for it. So hopefully there's more people that are supported that have a passion for the sport, and true passion, and they're not doing it for the money, because I feel like if you do things for the money, you tend to tweak your message to kind of cater to that money, and you're not as passionate about what you truly believe in, especially when you start getting money from brands. Then you can't be honest about that product anymore, because if you criticize it, they're going to be like, well, why are you criticizing us when we give you money? Stuff like that, right? So anyway, that's going to take a big hit this year, I think. So if you're a YouTuber and you're making money on your channel, especially from sponsors and stuff, just prepare a little bit that you might lose some of that money, and hopefully you have a backup plan for that, if that's your living. For someone like me, not my living. And the top YouTubers will still be there. The Sam Pilgrims, like those people there, you get so many viewers, nobody's going to cut them off enough to where it matters. So, marketing budgets will start to really get cut big time. So also, going into a recession, keep in mind I'm older. I've been through a few recessions and been into biking and even part of the bike industry, and I've watched this happen. So I also predict that as we go into a recession, the one area of biking that really takes off is the commuter segment. There's a reason for that. It's an affordable thing, and commuter bikes tend to be in a lower price point than the enthusiast bikes we all buy. Used to be, like $400, $500 was that entry level point to a decent commuter bike. That's bumped up quite a bit. I'm gonna say $600, $700, $800 before you get into a good, decent commuter bike. So that's gone up a little bit. Anything lower than that, it's just not going to be very good quality. But that area tends to just take off because people drive less. It's an affordable way to get around, and it's an affordable way to get out and do activities, things like that. So expect commuter bikes to take off. I'm going to lead this right into e-bikes because that's been booming, and I think commuter bikes and e-bikes will combine. I think a lot more commuter bikes that are going to be sold now are going to be e-bikes, and that makes sense. People that aren't really into it for the sport but into it for the transportation aspect, to get to work, to do chores, things like that, an e-bike absolutely makes sense. I have that Beano Boost e-bike, cargo bike. It's awesome. It does things really well for doing chores and stuff. I prefer to ride my regular non-e-bike when I'm doing recreational riding, but when I want to go to work, I want to do chores, things like that, go get stuff at the grocery store, or even ride to the bike shop, my favorite bike shop, Angry Catfish, and pick up parts, I'll jump on my e-bike and just fly over there, get my stuff, fly back. I mean, it's super awesome for that, right? So e-bikes, commuter bikes, those will be big. So speaking of e-bikes over on like the mountain bike side, and I do see gravel e-bikes and road e-bikes. Those don't really make sense to me, even though they're out there. But an e-mountain bike, those kind of make sense to me because there's a lot of like, hey, I want to get to the top so I can do the downhill part and stuff like that, which is really the only thing I really see a value in having a mountain bike e-bike, which is why I have no interest yet in owning one, because it's not super hilly here and I'd rather get the exercise of pedaling up the hill myself. But for people on the coast where there's mountainous and stuff, I can see e-bikes being more popular. But that's a category that will continue to grow. Last year, Trek introduced a new motor, which is much smaller. I mean, those bikes are starting to look more like regular bikes because they're getting the motor smaller, the battery smaller, and the bike's lighter. And as that happens and that technology evolves, I think it'll just make e-bikes more popular in the mountain bike segment. So that I think is going to just continue to grow in 2023. I think it might slow a little bit just because they're expensive and people aren't going to have as much money to spend on them. But I just think they'll still stick around for the enthusiasts, especially. Also on the technology front is electronic shifting. So more of that kind of stuff. And electronic shifting is super awesome. I like it. I added that GX axis to my Salsa Rustler and I love it. I did the Shimano thing, so I have a Shimano cassette and chain with the SRAM shifter and derailleur, wireless. It's a cleaner look and it works amazing. So I see why this is the way things are going. I feel like with mechanical shifting, we've kind of hit our limit on how good it can get, and it's really good. Like I just rode my fat bike at this New Year's ride yesterday, and I tweaked my GX after the initial break-in of the cable stretching and everything and got everything dialed. And it shifts so nice. It's like, and this is mechanical shifting. I don't think mechanical shifting can get any better. So expect that mechanical shifting is just no longer going to be like the high-end thing. But keep in mind that mechanical shifting as of today isn't going to go away. It's just going to stay stagnant in the lower component groups. At today's high-end level, if that makes any sense, and then electronic shifting is just going to take off and continue evolving. One of the advantages of electronic shifting is every shift you do is a exact, precise movement, and that it's just so crisp and so awesome. Pretty amazing. Versus when you're doing it manually, you don't always move that derailleur exactly how it needs to be moved to get the best shift. And it's pretty good the way it is today. So I see electronic shifting really being the high-end groups now, and mechanical shifting being the lower-end groups. Keep in mind, there's some other companies out there like Microshift, Box, and so on, also making drivetrains, and that gives them an opportunity to fill that gap. So maybe there'll be more, component groups out there, and so on and so forth. So I'm not too worried about it. I think if you love your mechanical drivetrains, you're always going to have like really good mechanical drivetrains available. So I see this starting to happen a little bit already. I think that manufacturing stuff in the US is going to start to trickle back. And I say trickle back. I don't think it's going to happen super quickly, but when we go back and think about the supply chain issues we had, having everything outsourced and made in Asia is really challenging. Companies have to plan months ahead, 9 months, a year, sometimes a year and a half ahead for what they're going to make. And by the time they get those components or bikes or whatever, the demand or the trend could have changed. So Chris Moeller has a good example in his latest Our BMX video that they did, an interview with him. He talked about these seats, right? He kept ordering these seats because they're made overseas by Velo, I believe it is. But it took a while for them to come and whatever. And then finally he got this big mass order of seats like a year and a half later. And now he's got an overstock of seats, right? Like way more than he needs. That's like... And the demand's starting to drop. So it's kind of like, well, now what do? You have all these seats. You're going to have to close them out, things like that. Well, I think companies are going to learn from this, and they really should. I hope they do start manufacturing things in the U.S. again. In the 80s and 90s, there's a mass exodus of just outsourcing everything to Asia. Pretty much 95% of everything in the bike industry is made overseas. And I really think it's important to start bringing that back to the U.S. But it'll be a trickle. It won't happen suddenly. But then there's companies out there like Wolftooth and stuff that are making stuff in the U.S. And that's pretty cool to see. And there is some stuff they have made overseas, but most of their stuff is made in the U.S., actually right here in Minnesota. And, some of the things they have to have done overseas because we don't have the know-how on how to do that stuff anymore. And that's unfortunate. Like suspension, stuff like that. I think their dropper post is made overseas because there's not really the technology and the know-how of how to do that, especially affordably in the U.S. And that's kind of scary when I think about it. Like, we no longer have the capability in this country to do certain things, and you have to go overseas. We don't want that to be the case. So I predict slowly U.S. manufacturing will start happening more and more again, especially at the high-end stuff, but definitely, hopefully, in the mid-tier and stuff and with components and things like that. I think about companies like S&M who have been making stuff in the U.S., Standard Bikes also in Davenport, Iowa, but S&M, Chris Moeller's been in the spotlight a few times, talks a lot about U.S. manufacturing. What makes it so cool is that he can do smaller batches of things. They're released much quicker, and they can tweak things. So if they do a batch of, like, let's just say 100 frames or 200 frames, and they find out, something isn't quite right, they can adjust that on the next batch. They do things like that, right? and they can kind of match demand. If the demand for something starts to drop, they don't end up with this huge mass overstock of something, as to where like companies that have their frames manufactured overseas, they have to order those things 9 months, a year or more in advance, and then they get this mass of like 1,000 or 2,000 frames, and maybe the demand has dropped, right? Like, yeah, I don't know why they think that that's the way to do things, but it's how they do it. And I really like when Chris Muller talks about kind of how S&M operates and how they can do these smaller batches and kind of keep things in line with what the trends are and the demands. I think that's super important, super cool to see that they're still out there doing it. Hopefully more companies see a value in doing business that way, because I think it's the way we need to go if we want to have a more sustainable future in this country. And that goes outside of the bike industry. That goes with a lot of industries in this country. They really need to get off this outsourcing kick that they've gotten on since the 80s. So brought up Chris Muller. So let's talk about BMX now, because I mostly talked about the bike industry as far as like mountain biking and things like that. But BMX is kind of a whole nother animal. I think BMX is going to continue to grow. During recessions, I've seen BMX grow. Racing is huge internationally now. Like, I feel like BMX racing has gotten bigger in the rest of the world and not as big in the US, but now I've seen the growth of racing kind of resurface in the US. The Grand Nationals down in Oklahoma, I had the biggest turnout ever last fall. So I think racing is going to continue to grow and thrive here in the US. Freestyle, I think it's going to hold true. The skill you see there is just amazing. The street riders, the park riders, it is absolutely amazing. And skateboarding kind of falls in line with that too. Like, these are things that are relatively affordable that people can do when there's a downturn in the economy. You get a BMX bike. Once you have that bike, you can go out and ride it wherever. Like, you just go ride around. You go find a local skate park, go ride around your neighborhood, things like that. So I think BMX will do pretty good during this downturn in the economy. There might be some cuts as far as like at the high level, as far as like the pros and the money that's going into it, but as far as like from the rider's perspective and the sport as a whole, I think it's going to hold true and do just fine. Cool. And another big boom is gravel biking, all road bikes, things like that. I think that's going to continue. Maybe there'll be less demand because there was definitely a spike of demand for that stuff. But I do see road biking kind of shrinking and gravel becoming the next big thing. And even the people that compete in those levels are moving to gravel and so on and so forth. Gravel is more accessible. You don't have to ride on heavy traffic roads. And if you think about events and racing, when they do road bike races, they have to shut down roads and parts of cities in order to do this event. And gravel, it's much easier because they're not as populated of roads to do a gravel event. And all the gravel events I've done, they don't even shut down the roads. Every once in a while a car comes down the road and you got to deal with the car, right? But yeah, I just see gravel as so much more accessible, and as event promoters, much easier for them to do because it doesn't require so much logistics, shall I say. Not that it's easy to do any event, right? You got to promote it, do all these things, set up the course, do all the planning. But when you think about, hey, I have to go deal with the city government, and you're in a major metropolitan area and you're like, oh, I want to close down this road, this road, this road, this road to have an event. That's a much tougher thing to do. So I see gravel as kind of a big, kind of growing trend. Touring bikes, all-road bikes, whatever you want to call them, all-terrain bikes, those things are going to be kind of commonplace. They'll also might trickle over into the commuter category, things like that. So, that'll continue to at least stay stable, if not grow a little bit still. I do see road kind of having a struggle. I don't see why that's going to continue to grow and thrive. Again, it might stay kind of flat or even decline a little bit, so on and so forth. Especially for the average consumer. Racing will always be racing, but for the average consumer, if somebody's going to get like a road bike, they're probably more likely going to get like a gravel bike or an all-road bike or something, and not get something so specific that can only go on pavement. So yeah, that's what I predict. It's already started to happen. If you go look at bikes, drop bar bikes, their gravel category is huge and the road category is getting much smaller. So cool. And let's talk about my channel. What are my plans for 2023? Well, not a whole lot's going to change. I'm going to keep doing what I'm going to do. I look at the analytics, and some of my videos are a lot less popular than other ones, but when I run into people and meet people and they talk about my channel, they love my channel and so on and so forth, even those lower viewed videos that don't get all the big analytics hits on them are the ones they talk about. They're like, oh, that was super helpful. That information really helped me out, that, this, and that. So I'm going to keep doing that. It's not about being popular or getting the most views on a video. It's about, I want to be helpful to people. So I can keep doing that stuff. The video where I did the skate park in the mall, that one was super huge and popular or whatever. Well, yeah, it is, because it's interesting, right? It's like interesting to more people than just hardcore BMX riders. It's like, oh, weird, there's a skate park in a shopping mall in an old store, right? Like, I get why that one's more popular, right? But I'm going to keep doing the informative videos that probably only target a very small slice of people that are interested in it, because I enjoy doing them because I'm an enthusiast. So that's the way it is. As far as like new stuff, and I've already started doing it, is I've been talking about being an older rider and what I do as an older rider. I'm going to keep doing that, and I'm going to actually push for that a bit more in 2023. I get a lot of positive feedback on those videos, and I feel like it helps inspire other people, you out there, to continue riding or get into riding, and even BMX. Like, I get quite a few older people that are not like asking me questions about what BMX bike they should get and how they should get into it and things like that. And I think that's cool. You can be in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. If you've never ridden BMX, you can still get a BMX bike and try it out. And if you do that and you're a mountain biker or any other kind of cyclist, your skills will spike really quickly if you start riding BMX, because that's kind of the thing that will give you all those like fine-tuned skills that you need. It's why even at 55, when I'm mountain biking, I'm one of the higher skilled mountain bikers out there. Just yesterday it was interesting because in this New Year's ride, I was coming around this tight corner, and I cut it out of the video because all these other people were fumbling around. I'm like, well, that's not very nice to them because they're fumbling and falling off their bikes and stuff. And I came through, and I was able to make this tight turn, and I stopped. I did a couple hops, and I pedaled and hopped and went around the corner, and somebody was like, whoa, cool. Like, they were pretty impressed. And then I rode up the hill. It's that kind of stuff. The reason I can do that is because of my BMX background, and so on and so forth. So I will be always push those skills, those base skills, and your age should not limit you on what you can do. I get it if somebody has some kind of physical disability, that's unfortunate, but for most of us, age shouldn't be a factor that prevents you from doing the things you want to do. So there you have it. That'll be a bigger part of my channel in 2023 because it's what I'm passionate about, and I love it that I help inspire people to ride and get into riding or continue riding and help evolve their skills and things like that. So So there you have it. That's my predictions for 2023 and where I'm going to take my channel. Not a lot of changes there. 2022 was pretty awesome. I'm pretty excited with how it turned out. I think 2023 will have its challenges, but I'm looking forward to it. It's really up to each of us as individuals to make 2023 what it is. Recession or not, we can still keep doing what we're doing. You just got to probably tighten your budgets a little bit, things like that. But yeah, let's jump into 2023 and have a blast. I appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace.